I'd heard the stories all my life. A cursed tree hidden deep in the woods, hollowed out by some ancient force. They called it the Hollow. Locals swore that anyone who dared approach it on Halloween never returned. Whispers spread, and people would shiver at the mere mention of it. But I wasn't one to believe in old legends. Or at least that's what I told myself. This Halloween, I found myself standing in front of it. The tree was enormous, its bark blackened and gnarled as if it had been scorched by lightning. The twisted roots reached out from the ground like fingers grasping at the earth. There was a hollow at its center, wide enough to crawl through, but it was dark. So dark I couldn't see more than a few inches inside. It was unsettling, unnatural even, and despite the cold air, my palms were sweating. As the wind howled around me, leaves swirled at my feet, and the rustling branches above seemed to whisper warnings. But I'd come this far. Turning back wasn't an option anymore. I had to know. Was it just a myth? Or was there something waiting inside? I took a step closer, the earth beneath me soft and damp. My heart pounded against my ribs as my fingers brushed the bark of the tree. Cold. So cold it felt like ice burning into my skin. Then before I could pull away, something moved inside the hollow. I froze. There was no wind now, no sound at all, except for the rapid beat of my heart. Slowly I leaned in, squinting to see into the pitch blackness. A shadow darted by, too fast for me to register what it was. My breath hitched. The legends couldn't be true, could they? I reached out to touch the tree again, this time more deliberately, as if daring it to prove the stories wrong. The instant my hand pressed against the hollow, the world shifted beneath me. I was falling. There was no sound, no sensation, but the sickening lurch of my stomach as everything around me warped and twisted. It felt like hours or maybe seconds before I hit solid ground, gasping for air. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, and for a moment I couldn't move. When I finally opened my eyes, I wasn't in the woods anymore. The sky above was wrong. A dull, blood-red hue stretched across the horizon, casting everything in an eerie light. The trees surrounding me were twisted, contorted into grotesque shapes. The ground beneath me was cold and wet, the smell of decay hanging heavy in the air. It was my world, but distorted. Twisted. I stood, every muscle tense, listening. There was nothing. No birds. No wind. No life. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow me whole. Then I heard it. A shuffle behind me. Something was there, watching. My skin prickled and I turned, but the only thing in sight was the twisted tree. The hollow, but not the one I knew. Its bark was slick with something dark and wet. I swallowed hard and took a step back. That's when I saw it, reflected in the hollow of the tree. A face. It wasn't mine. Pale, eyes wide and bloodshot, a twisted grin stretching far too wide. It stared back at me from the darkness, unmoving, unblinking. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped closer, squinting into the reflection, trying to understand. The face mirrored my every move, but something was off, something subtle at first. Then I realized the reflection wasn't looking at me. It was looking behind me. I whipped around, and for a moment everything went still. My pulse thundered in my ears. There was nothing there. Nothing but the tree, the twisted, silent forest, and that feeling. That undeniable, suffocating feeling that I was not alone. I couldn't stay here. I turned back to the hollow and reached for it, desperate to escape. But before I could touch it, the air shifted again and the temperature dropped. I felt a presence behind me. Cold fingers brushed the back of my neck. And then a whisper, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. Run, but I couldn't. My legs were frozen, my feet rooted to the ground as a shadow loomed over me, growing larger, darker. It wasn't human. I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. Then suddenly, the ground beneath me split open with a deafening crack. I fell hard and the world spun into darkness once more. But this time something came with me. I woke up in darkness. My head throbbed and my body ached as if I'd been crushed under something heavy. The air was thick, oppressive, and it stank of rot. I struggled to push myself up, the ground beneath me wet and slimy, clinging to my skin. For a moment I couldn't remember where I was, but then it all came flooding back. The hollow. The cursed tree. The reflection that wasn't mine. I shivered, the memory of those cold fingers on my neck sending a wave of nausea through me. My hands trembled as I reached out, feeling around in the dark. The ground was uneven, like the floor of some forgotten cave, slick with whatever foul liquid was seeping from the earth. My fingertips brushed something hard, stone maybe? I couldn't see anything, but the sound of my breath echoed around me like I was in a massive, empty chamber. Or not so empty. A faint scraping sound cut through the silence. I froze. It was distant but growing louder, like something being dragged along the stone. Slowly, methodically. My pulse quickened, every instinct screaming at me to move, but I couldn't tell which way to go. The darkness was so thick it felt alive, pressing in from all sides. The scraping stopped. For a moment, there was only my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. Then, a low, guttural growl rumbled from somewhere behind me. I spun around, squinting into the void, but there was nothing. No shape, no shadow, just that endless, suffocating blackness. But I felt it. Something was there, watching, waiting. I backed up, my feet slipping on the wet stone, my hands outstretched to feel for a wall or anything solid. I couldn't stay here. I had to find a way out before. Suddenly, a sharp snap echoed through the darkness, followed by a wet, slithering noise that sent chills down my spine. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was coming from above me. I didn't dare look up, but I could feel something moving, shifting in the darkness, its presence pressing down on me like a weight. The scraping returned, louder now, accompanied by that sickening, slithering sound. It was closer. Too close. I turned to run, but my feet slipped again, and I hit the ground hard, my hands plunging into the cold, slimy muck. The wetness soaked through my clothes, and the smell. It was unbearable, like decaying flesh. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to my feet, wiping my hands on my shirt, desperate to get away. But as I stood, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed, kicking wildly, trying to shake it off, but whatever it was had a grip like iron. My heart raced as I looked down, expecting to see a hand, or worse, but there was nothing. Nothing I could see. Just the pressure around my ankle, pulling, dragging me backward. The scraping grew louder, and this time I felt it, something brushing past me in the dark, too fast to comprehend. It was all around me now, circling, toying with me. I fought against the invisible grip, my muscles straining, but it was no use. I was being dragged toward something, and I didn't want to know what. My fingers dug into the slick stone, searching for anything to hold onto, but there was nothing. I was slipping, sliding into the darkness. Then, without warning, the grip loosened. I tumbled forward, free, gasping for air, but I couldn't stop moving. My momentum carried me forward, and I fell hard, slamming into something solid. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I ignored it, crawling desperately away from whatever had grabbed me. It was silent again. Too silent. I pressed my back against the wall, my chest heaving as I tried to calm my racing heart. The darkness seemed thicker now, almost tangible, like it was wrapping itself around me. I could feel it pressing against my skin, crawling up my arms, suffocating. And then I heard it. A whisper. Not the kind of whisper you hear from across the room. This was right in my ear, cold and breathy, sending a shiver down my spine. "You'll never leave." My blood turned to ice. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, my eyes darting around, desperate to see something, anything, but there was only darkness. Suddenly, a light flickered to life in front of me. It was faint, just enough to illuminate the space around me. I was in some kind of underground tunnel, the walls slick with moisture, the air thick with the stench of decay. But it wasn't the tunnel that caught my attention. It was the figure standing at the end of it. It was me, or at least it looked like me. Pale skin, wild eyes, dirt smeared across my face. But there was something wrong. The figure stood too still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its eyes empty, hollow. And then it smiled. My breath hitched in my throat. The smile was too wide, too wrong. And as it grinned at me, I realized something horrifying. It wasn't just mimicking me, it was asterisk replacing asterisk me. Before I could react, the light flickered out, plunging me back into darkness. And I knew, whatever was down here with me, whatever had grabbed me, it wasn't going to let me leave. Not as asterisk myself asterisk. The scraping noise returned, closer than ever. I didn't dare move. The darkness was thick, smothering, and the sound of that slow, scraping noise filled the tunnel. It was closer now, impossibly close. My mind raced, my pulse thundered in my ears. The thing that looked like me, smiled like me, was somewhere in that pitch-black void. And it was coming for me, I could feel it. My back pressed hard against the cold stone wall, the moisture from it seeping through my clothes. I tried to steady my breathing, to quiet the panic that clawed at my throat, but the air was thick and stifling. The whisper I'd heard before still echoed in my mind. "You'll never leave." The words were like a curse, clinging to me. My hand shook as I reached out in front of me, feeling for anything. An opening, a path, something to help me escape. But all I touched was cold, slick stone. There was no way out. I was trapped. Then the scraping stopped. Silence. For a moment the tunnel was still. Too still. I strained my ears, trying to hear over the sound of my own heartbeat, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no whispers. Just that dreadful silence. I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone. But where was it? Was it waiting? watching? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. If I stayed here, it would find me. I needed to keep going, even if I couldn't see. I pushed off the wall, my steps slow and cautious, the floor beneath me slick and uneven. Every sound I made seemed amplified in the quiet, and I winced at each soft splash of my feet hitting the damp stone. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching on into the abyss, twisting and turning in ways that disoriented me. I had no idea where I was or how deep underground I'd fallen, but it didn't matter. I had to get out. I had to get away from that thing. Suddenly, a low groan echoed from the darkness behind me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound wasn't human, it was guttural, almost like an animal. My skin prickled with fear, and I took another step forward, desperate to put more distance between myself and whatever was lurking back there. And that's when I felt it. Cold air brushing against the back of my neck like a breath. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but I saw nothing. Just that endless blackness. My chest tightened, and I turned back, trying to keep my feet moving, but it felt like the darkness itself was closing in on me. That's when the light flickered again. This time it wasn't a soft glow. It was blinding, a sudden burst of bright white that flooded the tunnel, revealing the twisted walls and wet stone floor. For a moment I could see everything, and I wasn't alone. The figure stood just a few feet away, frozen in the light, its head tilted at that unnatural angle, its face twisted into a grotesque smile. It was me, or it had been. But the longer I looked, the less human it seemed. Its skin was too pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were empty, hollow black pits that seemed to absorb the light. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching with terror as the thing's smile widened, stretching impossibly far across its face. My heart hammered in my chest, and I knew I had to run. I turned and bolted, my feet slipping on the slick ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The light flickered again, plunging me back into darkness, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The sound of scraping filled the tunnel once more, louder this time, echoing off the walls as that thing, that twisted version of me, chased me through the endless maze of stone. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't dare slow down. I could feel it behind me, gaining on me, its presence cold and suffocating. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in ways that made no sense, but I kept running, the sound of its pursuit growing louder with each step. Then up ahead I saw it, a faint light flickering at the end of the tunnel. An exit. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning with the effort, but the light didn't seem to get any closer. It was as if the tunnel was stretching, pulling away from me, taunting me with the promise of escape that I could never reach. Suddenly something cold and wet wrapped around my ankle. I screamed, stumbling forward as whatever had grabbed me yanked me to the ground. My chin slammed into the stone and pain exploded through my head. I gasped, struggling to free myself, but the grip tightened, pulling me back toward the darkness. I kicked and thrashed, my fingers clawing at the slick ground, but it was no use. It was too strong. Then the whisper came again, louder this time. "You can't leave. Not like this." My skin crawled and I twisted around, expecting to see the creature behind me, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was me, the twisted reflection, but this time it wasn't smiling. Its face was contorted with rage, its black eyes burning with something like hatred. It crawled toward me on all fours, its limbs moving in unnatural jerky motions. And as it drew closer, I realized something horrifying. It wasn't trying to kill me, it was trying to replace me. I screamed again, kicking with all my strength, but the thing kept coming, its hollow eyes locked on mine. My mind raced, my body frozen in terror as it reached out, its cold fingers brushing against my skin. Then the tunnel filled with blinding light. For a moment I couldn't see anything, just white, searing brightness that burned into my eyes. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the light faded, leaving me alone in the dark once more. But the creature was gone. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence was deafening. I didn't dare move, terrified that it would come back, that it was still out there, waiting in the dark. Then slowly I pushed myself up, my body trembling with exhaustion. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going, but I couldn't stay here. I had to keep moving. I had to find a way out before it came back. I turned toward the faint light in the distance, but this time I didn't run. I crawled. The light ahead grew brighter, flickering like a beacon of hope. My legs burned, every muscle screaming in protest, but I refused to stop. The weight of fear pressed down on me, the cold air clinging to my skin like a living thing. Behind me, I could still hear it. Me, or whatever that creature was, stalking closer. But I wasn't going to let it win. I couldn't. As I reached the edge of the tunnel, the light flared one last time, blinding me. I stumbled forward, my foot catching on something, and I fell hard to the ground. My palms hit cool, soft grass. Grass? I blinked, disoriented, as my eyes adjusted to the sudden change in light. I was no longer in the dark, twisted tunnel beneath the earth. I was outside. The sky above me was the deepest blue, and the stars shimmered brightly. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh soil. I pushed myself up, gasping for breath, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The dark, oppressive weight that had surrounded me moments ago was gone. It was as if I had been spat out from another world. The tree, the hollow, stood just a few feet away, its gnarled, blackened bark twisted and ancient, but now it seemed still, silent. Whatever force had been inside, whatever had pulled me in, was gone. The whispers, the strange reflection, the crawling roots, it was all behind me. I was free. I stood slowly, my legs trembling from the effort, and looked around. The forest seemed alive again, the leaves rustling gently in the breeze, the night sounds returning, crickets chirping in the distance. For a moment I could hardly believe it. I'd escaped. I'd survived. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. At the base of the tree, where the hollow gaped open like a mouth, there was a faint glow, a soft golden light. I took a cautious step forward, curiosity pulling me in. It wasn't the cold, eerie light that had filled the tunnel. This was warm, almost inviting. Against my better judgment, I knelt down and peered inside. There, nestled in the roots, was something small and shimmering, something alive. I reached out, hesitating for just a moment before my fingers brushed against it. The moment I touched it, the warmth spread through me, a gentle, soothing wave that washed away the last remnants of fear. I pulled my hand back, and there, cradled in my palm, was a small golden key. It glowed softly, casting a gentle light around me. As I stood clutching the key, I felt a strange sense of calm. The darkness that had once consumed me was gone, and in its place was a sense of peace. I didn't know what the key was for, but I knew deep down that it was something important, something meant for me. I glanced back at the hollow one last time. The tree stood still and silent, no longer a threat. Whatever curse had lingered there, whatever dark force had trapped me, was gone. The tree had given me something in return. A chance. A way out. With the key safely in my hand, I turned away from the tree, walking toward the path that would lead me back home. The stars above twinkled brightly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed easily. As I reached the edge of the woods, I stopped, looking back at the hollow one last time. It stood quietly in the moonlight, a relic of an ancient curse that had finally been broken. I smiled softly to myself. I had made it out. I was free. And as I walked away, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes, even in the darkest places, there is light. Even in the most cursed of trees, there is a way home. The nightmare was over, and I had won.